Thank you. So I think this is going to be the speculative part of the conference. So I spent the pandemic writing a book, which is due to the publisher in 2.5 hours. So luckily it's mostly done. And what I'm writing about is hacking, extending the hacking metaphor toward social, political, economic systems and what that means and how to think about that. And what I want to talk about now is the notion of AI hackers. So I think AI is going to hack all sorts of social, economic, and political systems and use and exploit them at an unprecedented rate. And I think it's not just a difference in degree, it's a difference in kind, and will culminate in AI systems hacking other AI systems, and we humans kind of being bystanders and collateral damage. All right, so maybe that's a bit of hyperbole, but none of that requires any far future science fiction technology. I'm not postulating a singularity. I'm not assuming intelligent androids. I'm not even actually assuming evil intent on the part of anyone. The hacks I'm going to talk about don't even require major breakthroughs in AI. They'll improve as AI gets better, but we can see hints of them today. And these hacks will come naturally as AIs become more advanced at learning, understanding, and problem solving. All right, so first I want to generalize the term hacking. Think about the tax code. It's not computer code, but it's code. It's a series of algorithms with inputs and outputs. Those are the tax rules. It has vulnerabilities. We call them tax loopholes. It has exploits. We call them tax avoidance strategies. And there's a whole industry of black hat hackers whose job is to find exploits in the tax code. We call them tax attorneys and tax accountants. Right? So what is a hack? Here's my definition. Something that a system permits but is unanticipated and unintended by the designers. Or another definition, a clever, unintended exploitation of a system which, one, subverts the rules of the system, two, at the expense of some other part of the system. It's a subjective term, encompasses a notion of novelty and cleverness. It's a subversion, an exploitation. It's unintended and unanticipated. Hacks follow the rules of a system but subvert its goals or intent. And I postulate that all systems of rules can be hacked. You can find hacks in professional sports, in airline frequent flyer programs, financial systems, politics, lots of economic, political, and social systems. Against our cognitive functions, right, the talk we just heard, a curved hockey stick is a hack. And we know the name of the hacker who invented it. Mileage runs are a hack. The filibuster was originally a hack back in Roman times. Hedge funds, private banking, full of hacks. Right? Even the most best thought out systems of rules will be incomplete and inconsistent. Right? It'll have ambiguities. That's why we have courts, that's why we have attorneys. Right? And there'll be things the designers haven't thought of. And as long as there are people who want to subvert the goals of a system, there will be hacks. And AIs are becoming hackers. So in 2016, DARPA held an AI capture the flag contest. So if you go to hacker conferences, you know this game. Basically, teams compete on a simulated network, defending their network, hacking others, and best wins. At this DARPA competition in 2016, there were 100 different AIs competing. 7 finalists faced off at DEF CON for 10 hours. All the AIs hacked each other. They did it on stage. It was actually pretty boring. It was like 6 computers standing there for 10 hours. It was an AI called Mayhem that won, and it's actually now a commercial product. DARPA never did this event again, but it's been happening every year in China since. And we know very little about what's coming out of that. AIs are also finding vulnerabilities in computer code. I mean, they're not that good at it, but they're going to get better. And you know how this works with pretty much all AI systems. They start out not very good, and they get better, and humans are here, and eventually the AIs pass. But the implications go far beyond computer networks to vulnerabilities in the tax code, vulnerabilities in financial regulations, vulnerabilities in all sorts of systems. And there are really 2 different issues here. The first, and you can imagine that an AI might be instructed to hack one of these systems. You could imagine someone feeding an AI the world's tax codes or the world's financial regulations with the goal of it creating a bunch of profitable hacks. The other issue is that an AI might naturally, albeit inadvertently, hack a system. Both are dangerous, but the second is actually more dangerous because we might actually never know what happened. And that's because of the explainability problem. All right, so The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if you remember the book, there was a race of hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings. They built the world's most powerful computer, deep thought, to answer the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And the answer was 42. And if you remember, deep thought was unable to explain its answer or even tell you what the question was. That's the explainability problem. Modern AI systems are essentially black boxes. Data goes in one end, answer comes out the other. And it can be impossible to understand how the system reached its conclusion, even if you're the programmer, even if you have access to the code. AIs don't solve problems like humans do. Their limitations are different than ours. They consider more possible solutions than we might. More importantly, they look at different types of solutions. They go down paths that we humans don't consider, sort of more complex than the kinds of things we can normally keep in mind. So 2016, the AI program AlphaGo won a 5-game match against one of the world's best Go players. This is something that shocked both the AI and the Go playing worlds. AlphaGo's most famous move was Move 37, Game 2. And without going into Go strategy, it's hard to explain, but it was a move that no human would have ever made. 2015, there's a research group that fed an AI system data from about 700,000 patients and testing whether the AI can predict diseases. The result was a success, but Deep Patient, as it was called, provides no explanation of how it reaches a diagnosis. And the researchers have no idea how it reaches its conclusions. And a doctor can either accept what Deep Patient says, but it can't query it for more info. Now, researchers are working on explainable AI, and there are going to be advances in this field, but there seems to be a trade-off between capability and explainability. Explanations are a cognitive shorthand used by humans, suited for the way humans make decisions. And forcing an AI to produce an explanation is an additional constraint that can affect the quality of its decisions. And at least in the near term, AIs are becoming even more opaque and less explainable. All right, so now I want to talk about reward hacking. I said that AIs don't solve problems in the same way humans do. And they invariably stumble on solutions that we humans don't anticipate. And some of them will subvert the intent of the system. And that's because AIs don't think in terms of the implications, context, norms, and values that we humans take for granted. So that's reward hacking. It involves achieving a goal, but in a way that the AI designers neither wanted nor intended. And the examples are pretty great. So there's a soccer simulation where an AI figured out that instead of kicking the ball to the goal, it kicked the ball out of bounds. The opposing player have to throw the ball back into bounds, leave the goal unattended. There was a stacking simulation where the AI figured out that it could flip a block upside down rather than stack it. And there was an evolution simulation where, the goal was to reach a distant finish line, and instead of growing stronger muscles or longer limbs, the AI grew really tall and just fell over the goal. So these are all hacks. You can blame them on poorly specified goals or rewards, and you'd be correct. You can point out that they all occurred in stimulated environments, and you'd also be correct. But the problem is more general. AIs will inadvertently hack systems in ways we won't expect. There's a story of a researcher trying to teach his robot vacuum cleaner not to bump into things. And instead of not bumping into things, it learned to drive backwards because there are no sensors back there. Right? Any good AI system will naturally find hacks. If there are problems, inconsistencies, or loopholes in the rules, and if those properties lead to an acceptable solution as defined by the rules, then the AI will find them. So we all learn this problem as a child, and that's the King Midas story. So after the god Dionysus grants him a wish, Midas wishes that everything he touches turns to gold, and he ends up miserable and starving when his food, drink, and daughter all turn to gold on touch. So it's a specification problem. Midas programmed the wrong goal into the system. We also know that genies can be very precise about the wording of wishes and can be maliciously pedantic when granting them. But here's the thing. There's no way to outsmart the genie. Whatever you wish for, he will be able to grant it in a way that you wish he hadn't. The genie will always be able to hack your wish. The general problem is that in human language and thought, goals and desires are always underspecified. We never describe all the options. We never include all the exceptions and provisos. We can't. Any goal we specify will necessarily be incomplete. And this is largely okay in human interactions because people understand context and act in good faith. So if I asked you to get me some coffee, you would probably go outside and pour me a cup, or maybe go down the street to a coffee shop and buy a cup for me. You would not bring me a pound of raw beans. You would not buy me a coffee plantation. You wouldn't look at the person next to you, rip the cup of coffee out of his hands and give it to me. You wouldn't give me a week-old cold coffee or a used paper towel that wiped up a coffee spill. Right? I wouldn't have to specify any of that. You would just know. Right? And similarly, if I asked you to develop a technology that would turn things into gold on touch, you wouldn't design it in a way that starved the person using it. I wouldn't have to tell you. You would just know. We can't completely specify goals to an AI, and an AI won't be able to completely understand context. So 2015, Volkswagen was caught cheating on emission control tests. This is not an AI story. Human engineers programmed a regular computer to cheat, but it illustrates the problem really nicely. So the engineers programmed the engine to detect emission control tests in progress and behave differently when being tested. And the cheat remained undetected for about a decade because it's hard to figure out what computers are doing. Now, if I asked you to design an engine control software to maximize performance while still passing all emission control tests, you wouldn't cheat without understanding that you were cheating. That isn't true for an AI. Right? It's going to think out of the box because it doesn't know what the box is. And unless programmers specify the goal of not behaving differently while being tested, an AI might come up with that hack on its own. The programmers will be satisfied, the accountants will be ecstatic, and because of the explainability problem, we're not going to know how the software works. And yes, now that we know the Volkswagen story, we can explicitly set the goal to avoid that particular hack, but there are other hacks the programmers won't anticipate. The lesson of the genie is there'll always be hacks the programmers won't anticipate. And the worry isn't limited to the obvious hacks. The greatest worry is the hacks that aren't so obvious, the ones whose effects are subtle, like the Volkswagen hack, that we're not going to see. Now, we're already seeing the first generation of this. A lot has been written about recommendation engines on social media, how they push people towards extreme content. They weren't programmed to do that. It's a property that naturally emerged. The algorithms learned to push extreme content because that's what people engage with, right? And that's important. It doesn't take a bad actor to create the hack. A pretty basic automatic system did it on its own. So nothing I'm saying here is news to AI researchers. And there are many that are currently working on ways to defend against goal and reward hacking. One solution is to teach AIs context. A general term for this research is value alignment. How do we create AIs that mirror our values? And you can think of it in terms of two extremes. The first is to explicitly specify what our values are. Good luck. The other is to create AIs that figure out our values by learning about humans in action. Good luck. Right? Both of these have problems, but that's where the research is. Right, so how realistic is anything I've said so far? The answer is it depends. The feasibility of any AI hacking depends on the specific system being modeled. For an AI to start optimizing a problem, let alone hacking a completely novel solution, the rules of the environment has to be formalized in a way the computer can understand. Goals, in AI we call them objective functions, need to be established, and the AI needs some sort of feedback mechanism on how well it's doing so it can improve its performance. Sometimes this is a trivial matter. For a game of Go, it's easy, right? The rules, objective, feedback, did you win or lose, are all precisely specified. And there's nothing outside of those things to muddy the waters. And that's why most of the current examples of goal and reward hacking come from simulated environments. Right? They're artificial and constrained with all the rules specified by the AI. What matters is the ambiguity of the system. We can imagine feeding the world's tax laws into an AI because the tax code consists of formulas. But there's still ambiguity in many of those laws, and that's why we have tax courts and tax attorneys. And that ambiguity is difficult to translate into code, which makes an AI have trouble dealing with. So most human systems are even more ambiguous. It's hard to imagine an AI coming up with a real-world sports hack like curving a hockey stick. The AI would have to understand not just the rules of the game, but the physiology of the players, the aerodynamics of the stick and puck, and sort of everything else about the environment. And that ambiguity ends up being a near-term security defense against the sort of AI hacking. And it'll be a long time before AIs are capable of simulating and modeling the ways that people work, and before they're capable of coming up with ways to hack a legislative process. We're not going to see AI-generated sports hacks until we have androids actually playing the sports, or maybe some kind of generalized AI. I think probably the first place to look for AI hacking is in financial systems, since those systems are designed to be algorithmically tractable. And we can imagine equipping an AI with all the world's financial laws, plus all the world's news and financial information, and then giving it the goal of a maximum profit. And my guess is that's not very far off, and the result will be all sorts of novel hacks. But here's the thing about AI. Advances are discontinuous and counterintuitive. Things that seem easy turn out to be hard. Things that seem hard turn out to be easy. And we don't know until a breakthrough occurs. When I was a college student in the early 80s, we learned that the game of Go would never be solved by an AI because of its enormous complexity. Not the rules, but the number of possible moves. And now a computer has beaten a human world champion. Some of this was due to advances in science of AI, but a lot of it was due to just throwing more computing power at the problem. So while a world filled with AI hackers is still science fiction, it's not stupid science fiction. And I want us to start thinking about the implications right now. So hacking is as old as humanity. We are creative problem solvers. We are loophole exploiters. We manipulate systems to serve our interests. And we strive for more influence, more power, more wealth. And hacking has always been a part of that. Still, no humans maximize their interests without constraint. That even sociopaths are constrained by the complexity of society, their own contradictory impulses, their reputation or punishment, their limited time. Hacking changed as everything became computerized. Because of their formalism and complexity, computers are uniquely hackable. And today, everything is a computer. But to date, hacking has exclusively been a human creative activity. Searching for new hacks requires expertise, creativity, time, and luck. And that is going to change. And when AI start hacking, everything will change yet again. They won't be constrained in the same ways or have the same limits as people. They will think like aliens. And they will change hacking speed, scale, and scope. So speed is easy. Computers are much faster than people. A human creative process that might take months or years could get compressed to days, hours, or even seconds. What might happen when you feed an AI an entire country's tax code? Or in the case of a multinational corporation, the entire world's tax codes? And will it figure out that you should register your ship in Panama? And how many loopholes will it find that we don't already know about? Dozens? Hundreds? Could it find thousands? We actually have no clue. And it's not just speed, but it's scale as well. Once AI systems start discovering hacks, they'll be able to exploit them at a scale we're not ready for. We're starting to see some of this with AI-generated text and conversation bots. It's going to get a lot bigger. Now, you can imagine text bots replicated by the millions across social media. Not with large platforms, with small platforms, making regular conversation, occasionally saying something with a political nature. Right? Run rampant, it will change what political debate looks like, what we see as debate. The increasing scope of AI systems also makes hacks more dangerous. AIs are already making important decisions that affect our lives. Decisions that we used to believe were the exclusive purview of humans. AIs make bail and parole decisions, help decide who receives bank loans, who gets into college. They screen job candidates, government services. As AI systems get more capable, society will cede more and more important decisions to them. And that means hacks of those systems become more damaging. And largely, these hacks will perpetuate the existing power structure. They'll be perpetrated by the powerful against the people. And while we have societal systems that deal with hacks, we've had for millennia, they were developed when hackers were human and reflect the pace of human hackers. We don't have any system of governance that can deal with hundreds, let alone thousands, of newly discovered tax loopholes. Right? We won't be able to recover from an AI figuring out unanticipated but legal hacks of financial systems. At computer speed, scale, and scope, hacking becomes a problem that we as society can no longer manage. All right, so finally, let's talk about defense. Back to computers. When AIs are able to discover new software vulnerabilities, it will be an incredible boon to hackers everywhere. They'll be able to use those vulnerabilities to hack computer systems around the world. It will put us all at risk. But those same technological AIs will be useful for the defense as well. Right? We can imagine a software company deploying it as a vulnerability-finding AI against its own code. It could identify and then patch all, or at least all of the discoverable vulnerabilities in its products before release. Right? The technology benefits the attacker and the defender equally, but the defender can patch it and it's forever fixed. Right? You can imagine this feature being built into compilers, being automatic, happening to every piece of code everywhere. We can imagine a future where software vulnerabilities are a thing of the past, which is kind of amazing. Now, right, the transition period is dangerous. The new stuff is secure, but the legacy code is vulnerable. And there the attackers have the advantage. But over the long run, an AI vulnerability finding technology favors the defense. And I think this is the same when we turn to hacking broader social systems. Sure, AI hackers might find hundreds of vulnerabilities in the existing tax code, but the same technology can be used to evaluate potential vulnerabilities in any new tax law or tax ruling. Right? We can imagine a tax law being tested in this way. Someone, it could be a legislature, a watchdog organization, the press, could test the text of a bill and find all the exploitable vulnerabilities. It doesn't mean they're going to get fixed. Right? Lots of loopholes are put in for political reasons, but it does mean they become public and part of the debate. And they can, in theory, be patched before the rich and powerful exploit them. And here too, right, the transition period is dangerous, but while AI hackers can be employed by the attacker and the defender, in the long term, the defense prevails. So ensuring the defense prevails also requires building resilient governance structures that can quickly and effectively respond to new hacks. I mean, it won't do any good if it takes years to update the tax code, like it does in the US right now. Or if a legislative hack can become so entrenched that it can't politically be patched, like happens in the US right now. Right? If you think about modern software, it's continuously patched. We need to figure out how to have that kind of agility with law that we do with computer code. So this is a hard problem of modern governance, and it's kind of well beyond the scope of this talk, my book, this conference, but something we need to start thinking about. It's not substantially different than the problem of building governance structures that can operate at the speed and complexity of the information age. And that's also something we need to figure out how to do. Right? It's not doing us any good to let corporations lead technology, that we need to sort of decide as society what we want out of technology. The overarching solution here is people. What I've been describing is the interplay between humans and computer systems and the risks inherent when the computers start doing the parts of the humans. And this, too, is a more general problem than AI hackers. It's also one that technologists and futurists are writing about. And while it's easy to let technology lead us into the future, I think we're much better off as a society if we as a society decide what technology's role in our future should be. And this is all something we need to figure out now before these AIs start coming online and hacking our world. So with that, I thank you.